My parents tried to turn my wedding into my pregnant sister's wedding and told me not to attend, but I couldn't care less, and we had a great time without them. I am just 1 week away from marrying my fiancé Henry, but that's fine and not the problem. When Henry and I got engaged, we had initially decided to have a simple courthouse wedding. We both thought it made more sense financially and emotionally. We didn't see the point in spending thousands of dollars on just one day. What really mattered was our commitment to each other, not a lavish event filled with all the traditional embellishments. It seemed like a waste of resources that could be better invested in a house or savings. However, things changed once our families found out about our engagement. They were excited for us, of course, but they didn't take the idea of a quiet and private courthouse wedding very well. In fact, they openly insisted that we have a big wedding. My parents were the ones who pushed for it the most. To them, since I was their first daughter to get married, it was important to celebrate the occasion properly. So they weren't going to let the day be like any other and demanded a proper celebration. You see, my older sister Christina is still not married. As the younger sister, I didn't expect to be the first to get married, but that's just how things turned out. I guess this made my parents even more eager to go all out with my wedding. They probably saw it as a unique opportunity, at least until Christina had her moment. Even though this wasn't what Henry and I originally had in mind, seeing how much this wedding meant to our loved ones made us change our minds. In the end, we altered our plans just to please them. Both sets of parents sat down with us and contributed some money toward the celebration, while Henry and I covered the rest of the expenses. Over the past few months, this wedding has taken up an enormous amount of time to organize. But every detail has been a labor of love. One of the highlights of this process was working closely with my future mother-in-law. She and I took the time to visit several venues until we found the perfect one. It's a beautiful location that feels ideal for our special day, so securing it was a triumph for both of us. We've also booked an excellent catering service and finalized many other key details, from the flowers to the decorations. Last week, I went to try on wedding dresses. My mom and my mother-in-law accompanied me. Throughout all of this, my sister Christina wasn't able to join us. I really hoped she would be there, but she told me she had other plans. I truly wanted her with me, but I didn't insist because I assumed it must be something important to her. That was, of course, until today. This morning, I got a call from my parents asking me to come to their house urgently. They sounded unusually cheerful and said they had something important to tell me. When I arrived, I immediately noticed something was up. They were practically glowing with excitement. My mom wasted no time in delivering the news. Christina is pregnant. I hadn't heard even a rumor that Christina was seriously dating anyone, so this completely took me by surprise. Mom was absolutely ecstatic as she shared the news of my sister's pregnancy, calling it a miracle and a blessing for our family. She explained that Christina hadn't even been trying to get pregnant, which made the news feel even more unexpected and special to her. While my mom excitedly talked about how wonderful all of this was, my mind kept spinning. I couldn't help but ask the obvious question: who is Christina dating? At the very least, I wanted to know who the mystery man was that had gotten her pregnant. For context, my older sister Christina and I are not like traditional sisters who share everything. She rarely shows any interest in my life or bothers to call me. I've always suspected it's because she is academically more talented. She considers herself superior to me, something she has made clear with her words. When I met Henry and our relationship started getting serious, Christina never supported me. She constantly warned me that Henry would break my heart if I got too attached to him, and always urged me to focus on building a career instead of falling in love. Her comments seemed to come from jealousy, so I didn't pay much attention to them. Even when Henry and I got engaged, she couldn't muster much enthusiasm. All I got was a simple congratulatory text message, no phone call, no flowers, no conversation, nothing. Despite the lack of warmth or support from her throughout my life, I still wanted to include her in my wedding because she is important to me. I even asked her to be one of my bridesmaids. To my disappointment, she declined the invitation, saying she didn't want to have any prominent role in the wedding and would be happy just being a guest. I wasn't going to force her, so that was fine with me. So while I was surprised by this whole pregnancy thing, it wasn't like we shared everything with each other anyway. My parents continued excitedly talking about how Christina had met someone a few months ago and how happy she seemed with this man. Despite our relationship, I genuinely felt happy for her. A baby is a blessing, and if she had truly found someone who made her happy, that was something worth celebrating. I told my mom I would call Christina later to congratulate her on the pregnancy. It seemed like the right thing to do, and I wanted to show my support during this big moment. But then my parents told me they weren't finished. My dad said there was something else they needed to discuss with me. He hesitated for a moment, which made me nervous, and then he said it. Christina was planning to marry the father of her child. This made sense, of course. She would want to marry the person she loves and with whom she's having a baby. But then my dad added that they wanted me to give up my wedding for Christina. I stared at him, completely confused. "What do you mean, give up my wedding?" I asked, though I could already feel the kind of answer that was coming next. My dad went on to explain that since they had already contributed financially to my wedding plans, they couldn't afford to pay for Christina's wedding too. So their solution was for me to turn my own wedding into Christina's wedding and let her take my place. My mom chimed in saying I should do it as a wedding gift for my sister, and that I could always have another wedding later. Mom even reminded me that since Henry and I had originally wanted a simple courthouse wedding, maybe I could just go back to that plan and get married privately now. This way, Christina could have the grand celebration that my parents felt she deserved, especially with her pregnancy and her new partner. I sat there, mouth open, listening to their suggestions. I looked at both of them for a minute while thinking, this can't be happening, right? Finally, I asked, "Have you lost your minds?" Either they had gone crazy, or I was losing my mind and imagining everything. I reminded them that my wedding was literally 1 week away. This wasn't a picnic that could just be rescheduled. I had spent months of my life meticulously planning every detail of my wedding. I had dedicated my time, energy, and emotions to making that day special, not just for Henry and me, but also for them, for our families. I asked them, "Do you have any idea how much money, time, and effort I've put into this? The invitations have already been sent out, the vendors are already booked, the venue is reserved, my dress is bought. What am I supposed to do now? Just throw it all away for my sister?" My words came out angrier than I had intended, but I didn't care. I was absolutely furious about everything. My mom fired back with her reasoning, "Christina is pregnant. She needs to get married first. Your wedding can wait." My dad had something to add as well, saying they wouldn't be making this request if it weren't urgent and necessary. He even tried to reassure me, saying it wouldn't take much time to resend the invitations and adjust all the arrangements for Christina. To make things worse, my mom said, "Sweetheart, your wedding dress won't go to waste. You can simply give it to Christina." How convenient, right? How had I not thought of that before? What a fool I was for not realizing that a wedding plus a baby on the way was more important than just a simple wedding. Well, no. The fools were them for thinking I would just hand over my wedding. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure, and told them firmly that I was not going to give up my wedding. My wedding would go ahead as planned. My dad stood up and practically shouted, "It's our money that you used for this wedding. You have no right to go against what we've decided and what we want. If we paid, we decide how the money is spent." My dad continued saying, "Christina getting married is more important than you getting married. She's giving us our first grandchild, and that baby deserves to have a happy and stable family. This is bigger than you and us combined." My mom was a little more conciliatory. "You're not even pregnant, and you always said you didn't care about having a big wedding. You said it was a waste of money, remember? So now you can just let Christina have it. She deserves to be celebrated for bringing our first grandchild into the family." I told them that the only reason we were even having a wedding celebration was because they had insisted so much. And now, just 1 week before my wedding, they were demanding that I hand it over to my sister, as if I didn't matter at all. "And another thing," I continued, glaring at them, "you keep talking about how you paid for the wedding. Yes, you gave me money, but let's be clear about something. You explicitly told me it was a gift. Not a loan, not a way to control me. A wedding gift. You weren't the only ones who contributed. Henry and I paid for this wedding too, as did his parents. Do you really think they're just going to sit back and let you ruin this entire event?" My mom opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "I want to be very clear," I said. "This wedding is happening, my wedding. If you can't support that, then don't come. But don't think for a second that I'm going to cancel my wedding to please you or Christina. I'm not letting you take this away from me." My dad, still trying to make his case, said, "Even if the money we gave you was a gift, we still have every right to ask this of you. Your sister should get married before you. We wouldn't ask if it weren't important." His tone was condescending, as if he were explaining something to a stubborn child rather than addressing me as an adult. My mom had the same tone when she added, "You could talk to Henry and his parents about returning the money. I'm sure they'd understand and be willing to wait for you to save up in the future to pay them back for what they spent." So now I was supposed to take on the entire financial burden of canceling the wedding? That was mind-blowing to me. Did they really not see how ridiculous their request was? Or did they just not care? Then my mom threw in the ultimate guilt trip. "Anyone in your position would agree to this because Christina is your family, and family comes first." At that point, I was so furious I could barely think straight. I stood up, grabbed my things, and looked at them both. "Listen," I said, "my wedding is in a week. Nothing you say or do is going to change that. I'm happy for Christina, I really am, but I am not giving up my wedding. Not for anyone. Since then, my parents have been harassing me with messages and calls, insulting me, and trying to intimidate me into giving in to their demands. So Reddit, what's your verdict on my parents? How insane or narcissistic are they? Update 1. My parents have always shown favoritism toward my sister Christina. It's something I've noticed over the years, but I never thought it would reach this level. And apparently, the level of their craziness is over 8,000, according to you guys. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds pretty high. It's one thing for her to get an extra dessert as a kid just because there was only one left and she needed it more than me for some reason. But this, asking me to give up my wedding so she can have it instead, this is absolutely ridiculous. Their entitlement and sudden shift in behavior have left me stunned. Yes, they gave me money for my wedding, but they presented it as a gift, something given freely out of love and support. And now, just because they gave me that money, they think they have the right to dictate what I do with it? To the point of demanding that I cancel my wedding for Christina? How is that remotely fair? For those who asked if I've tried reaching out to Christina, yes, I have. I called her after my conversation with my parents, intending to congratulate her on her pregnancy and talk to her about what's going on, but she still hasn't returned my calls. I don't know if she's avoiding me, if she's overwhelmed with her own life right now, or if she even knows what our parents have asked of me. I'm in the dark, which only adds to my frustration and confusion. When I got home after that awful conversation with my parents, I sat down with Henry and told him everything. He listened as I recounted the entire story. By the time I finished, he was furious. And honestly, I could already tell during the conversation that he was practically foaming at the mouth. He couldn't believe my parents would even think of asking me something like this. He has seen how much effort I've put into planning this wedding and knows how much it means to me. The fact that they tried to take everything away from me to give it to Christina left Henry just as shocked and angry as I was. Henry loves me deeply, and seeing me so affected by the way my parents treated me broke his heart. He wanted to go talk to my parents right then and there, to set them straight about life, but I asked him not to. As much as I appreciated his support and protective instincts, I didn't want things to escalate even further. The last thing I needed was for this already painful situation to turn into an all-out family war. Instead, Henry and I talked things through and came to a decision. Even though the money my parents gave us was a gift, something they willingly gave without conditions, we decided to give it back to them. Legally, we have no obligation to do so. A gift is a gift. But morally, we don't want their money to be an excuse for them to control us. We don't want to feel indebted to them or give them any opportunity to try and manipulate us in the future. By giving the money back, they will have nothing to hold over us, and we won't be tied to their ridiculous demands. We'll have to dip into our savings to cover the amount, which means tightening our belts for a while. But Henry and I both agree it's worth it. We want to start our married life without this toxic cloud hanging over us. Because in some cases, that's worse than being short on money. We're going to return the money as soon as possible. And once it's done, I'll feel relieved knowing that our wedding is being funded entirely by us and Henry's parents. Update 2. I spoke with Christina, and now everything makes sense. It turns out that this whole situation was orchestrated by her. My sister didn't just not care about my wedding, she wanted to take it from me. She was the one who asked our parents to make me give up my wedding so that she could have it. She didn't even try to hide it, she just said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I even think she enjoyed it. She told me almost casually that as the older daughter, she didn't think it was unreasonable for our parents to ask me for such a big favor. She even seemed to believe that I should feel honored by the request, as if sacrificing for her was some great act of generosity on her part. One that I should feel privileged to accept. When I pressed her further, she explained the reasoning behind her request. Apparently, when she found out our parents had given me money for the wedding, and then she got pregnant and decided to get married, the idea came to her. She thought that since I already had the money and the wedding plans in place, it wouldn't hurt me to let her use everything I had organized. In her mind, it was the most logical and convenient solution to her situation. And that's the key. Her situation. She doesn't care about anyone else's situation because she is just that selfish. Her argument was that planning everything on her own would take too much time, finding a new venue, hiring a caterer, organizing the details. It would be too complicated, she said, and she didn't want to stress herself out with the preparations. Meanwhile, my wedding plans were already in motion, and if I simply stepped aside, she could take advantage of all the work I had already done. The venue, the vendors, the dress, the flowers. Everything could be hers, saving her all the effort and stress. Of course, she wasn't going to do anything because I had already done it. And her reasoning for that? She's pregnant. If we're talking about entitlement, I think my sister is ready to compete at the highest level. She thinks she's some kind of princess and I'm her servant, that I should kneel before her and give her everything she wants, because that's how life works. Well, I told her that's not how things are going to work. Christina kept arguing that, unlike me, she has a real career and, along with the pregnancy, is far too busy with her life to worry about a silly wedding. Then she admitted that if she hadn't gotten pregnant, she wouldn't even be thinking about getting married. I told her that Henry and I had already decided to return the wedding money to our parents, and suggested that maybe she could ask them for it instead. I told her she could use it for her own wedding if she wanted, as long as she planned it herself. In my mind, this was the most reasonable suggestion. After all, it was their money, and if they were so eager to support her, that was the best way to do it. Then Christina had the audacity to ask me to at least help her plan her wedding. She argued that since I wasn't letting her take my wedding, I should at least help her with the organization. According to her, I was more interested in those things anyway, so I'd be perfect for the job. I asked her if she would pay me, and she said no. So I coldly told her no. I told her that if she needed help planning her wedding, she could ask our parents. I wasn't going to work for free for her. Or, if she wanted, she could go to the courthouse and get a quick marriage there. At that moment, I also decided to uninvite Christina from my wedding. I didn't want her there, especially after everything she had said and done. Christina didn't even care that I uninvited her. She said she had already decided not to attend my wedding anyway. Update 3. Well, Henry and I have now returned the money to my parents. We knew it was the right thing to do, especially after how they had acted. To do so, we had to take out a small loan from Henry's parents. They were more than happy to help us, and we are incredibly grateful to them. We've agreed to pay them back monthly, and it's a relief to know we have their support during this difficult time. When we returned the money to my parents, they were furious. This time, Henry came with me and took charge of the conversation. He told them how wrong it was for them to manipulate me and make me feel like I had to sacrifice my own happiness for my sisters. After making it clear how hurtful and unfair their behavior was, Henry told them that he didn't even want them to attend our wedding. Until that moment, my parents were still hoping that my previous decision to uninvite them was just a joke. However, after we returned their money and Henry told them the truth directly, they became worried. My parents wanted us to at least reconsider that decision. Henry asked them if they would give us the money back, and when my parents said no, Henry told them they were not invited. Then my father asked if returning the money would mean they would be invited, and Henry told him no, they still wouldn't be. That was when my mom threatened that if we uninvited them from the wedding, they would simply cut me out of their lives. I just told them that I would gladly accept their decision, because uninviting them from the wedding was just the first step in our plan to remove them from our lives. And Henry added that if they cared so much about grandchildren, he hoped my sister would give them plenty, because as far as our future children were concerned, they could forget about that possibility. Henry and I had never discussed this before, but honestly, it was pretty logical. My parents didn't know how to respond. They were angry and embarrassed, but there was nothing else they could do. It's hard to put into words how grateful I am to have Henry by my side. I don't know how I would have handled my parents' drama without him. Update 4. This week, Henry and I finally got married, and fortunately, everything went well. Despite all the drama and the last few days, the wedding was even better than we had imagined. Some would say it was thanks to Christina and my parents not being there, and I might agree. The good news is that no one tried to bring up the subject, which helped a lot. Many people already knew they wouldn't be attending because my parents made sure to tell everyone. Maybe they thought that by doing so, they would get sympathy, or that some people would skip my wedding because, in their words, I was such an ungrateful and entitled daughter. Well, that didn't work out too well for them because no one could have cared less about their nonsense, and they weren't about to miss out on a wedding with good food and drinks. I know my parents are now planning Christina's wedding, but it won't be happening for another 2 months. That's the earliest they could schedule it because, according to them, they have to plan everything from scratch because of me. Again, those are their words. If you ask me, that's what they should have done from the start. But now, they have lost a daughter and future grandchildren just for trying to push my golden child sister's wedding up by 2 months. Update 5. Now I understand why my parents were so desperate to rush Christina's wedding. Or, more accurately, why Christina was so desperate to get married as soon as possible. It turns out there was no pregnancy. Her fiancé found out 2 weeks before the wedding. I don't know exactly what details led him to discover that Christina was faking her pregnancy, since it's unlikely it would have been physically noticeable in such a short time, but he decided to call off the wedding and cut ties with my parents, a combo deal that, according to Henry, he prefers not to expand. So, all the wedding planning my parents rushed to do ended up being for nothing. And believe me, because I just planned a wedding, very few things are refundable. It's true that my parents paid for half of the wedding, while the other half was covered by Christina's ex-fiancé's parents. Now, they are furious that their ex-daughter-in-law tried to scam them and are demanding a full refund. My parents, on the other hand, don't want Christina to pay, arguing that they also lost their share of the money. I don't personally know my sister's former in-laws, but from what some relatives tell me, the amount my parents lost was significant. It's not cheap to organize something last minute, especially when they wanted everything to be extravagant for their golden daughter. Something tells me Christina and my parents won't have a moment of peace until they pay back every last cent. And honestly, they deserve it and more, because what Christina did is the very definition of a scam. I hope to have more updates soon. Edit. I didn't want to make a new post because I don't think I have enough information for one, but I can tell you that Christina's ex-fiancé's parents' lawsuit against her has already been settled. They didn't go to court but decided to resolve everything privately. Even so, the settlement has cost my sister a lot. I can't say exactly how much because I don't know, but I do know it was more than what my parents paid since interest and compensation were added.